classroom full of Muslims and Christians saying that God's not real, there's no empirical proof that you can prove God to me, so I don't want to believe in God. Every human being, every living thing is God, and we're all just exploring God. Maybe God is not real, maybe this is all one big fairy tale lie so that people don't go around doing really bad things. So I kind of started to reject Islam, not only but all of religion, and I became somewhat agnostic during my younger years.
How was your life in regards to faith? What were you believing in?
I was at the time a social Muslim. That's the word that I will kind of call it. So following social Islam means that you don't read the actual book. You don't follow the actual Prophet, peace be upon him. You just kind of follow what everyone else is doing. You're following the Muslims. You're like a backseat Muslim. And that's what I was for the longest time. I'd fast just because all the friends, family, cousins, and everybody around me was fasting. And I'd pray just because everyone else is praying near me too. But I never truly knew why I was praying or why I was fasting, what the benefits were, or why God even said it. I was just kind of doing what everybody else did around me. I followed just by watching and not by actually reading. And that was the biggest mistake. I was always raised upon the thing like, if the slipper is upside down, it's pointing up towards God. Astaghfirullah. This is like, you're like saying God is only up and God can't see under these slippers. So like you're giving extreme limitations to God, really losing tawheed. You're kind of losing the whole essence of God by saying that He can only see from up to down. So if I go to my basement and close my door, then God can't see me commit sin. So all of these logical flaws were kind of imposed upon me, and many Muslims actually around the world. And that's what kind of makes us a social Muslim.
What events brought you to a point of leaving Islam?
I was sent to a Islamic school to teach me how to pray and how to read and write Arabic, and I kind of like rejected like a lot of it during that time. They kind of really forced Islam down your throat type of school, and it was really, really strict. I would cry every single morning going to the school, like my first day of preschool to probably the very last day. I would walk in, I'd be hugging my mom's leg to like not let me leave because I did not want to be like, away from her and into this school because it was very, very strict and stern. So by age 4 and 5 and 6, I kind of realized like I didn't want to be a part of something that was so scary and that was so strict. I kind of started to deviate away from that, and what really kind of turned the tides and made me somewhat of an agnostic atheist for a little while was that I had a teacher in middle school, I'll never forget him, and he kind of explained to a classroom full of Muslims and Christians saying that God's not real, there's no empirical proof that you can prove God to me, so I don't want to believe in God. And he started asking 12-year-old kids, prove to me, why is God real? All of us obviously being not educated enough on the topic, now I could, but back then I had no idea. So like to me, like this guy was the smartest guy that I knew. So I realized maybe God is not real. Maybe this is all one big fairy tale lie so that people don't go around doing really bad things. They have to just blindly believe in this blind faith. And for me to kind of see that as well in my first year of like high school, I realized that maybe all of this like religion stuff is just some sort of like man-made thing to kind of control us to make sure that we don't go and do bad stuff. And it's not the true word of our actual creator. If we really came from apes and it's being taught to us in school, and school is never wrong, it's always right. 5 plus 5 is always 10, then we have to also accept that, yeah, maybe we were once apes and we just kind of transitioned into human beings, and that's why we're here with no purpose, no guide, and no creator. So I kind of started to reject Islam, not only but all of religion, and I became somewhat agnostic during my younger years.
After rejecting religions, did you feel content or you continued questioning?
I was doing a little bit of research independent from Islam, just to see if we actually do have a creator that has fashioned us. The thing that I was living by was that energy cannot be created nor destroyed. That's the first law of thermodynamics, and everyone knows that one. And actually, that's the kind of thinking that made me think maybe we are all God. Maybe every human being, every living thing is God, and we're all just exploring God. So that really kind of did make some sense to me, because if we're all God, then so many questions started to pile up on top of that. Like, where did we truly come from? Are we going to live forever? What if bad things happen? Should I feel the burden of pain if something bad happens to me or somebody else? And also, if we're all God, isn't that a limitation to what God is? Because we're obviously not infinite. We have a start. If God has a start, is He truly God? Then what created that thing? So all these questions were coming at me left and right, and I truly didn't have any true purpose. I didn't know exactly what my actual faith was. I was trying to just figure it out, and I would actually cry myself to sleep so many nights. It was a really, really weird and strange time. Like, I would look at the most basic things, like a tree, for an example, and it would freak me out knowing like, how could this thing be in such perfect order that it came from a little small seed and now it's this extremely heavy and very, very tall, perfectly ordained tree? How can something like this happen? Or I would look at myself in my hands and think like, how am I actually alive right now, in control of my own thoughts? Where was I before this life, and where am I going to be after this life? And those questions, like not having a pure belief in it, it really kind of made my whole life very unstable, and I never truly knew what was going to happen to me next. I never knew how to deal with any of my real situations. But then when I looked into deeper of the thermodynamics, we have the second law, which states that entropy will continue to increase in energy. So disorder will continue to increase. And what this means, for an example, is let's say on the right side of this room in the corner, I place a little space heater and I let it run for like 1 hour and then turn it back off. The heat is not going to stay exactly in the corner of this room. It'll influence and balance the entire temperature of this entire room. So that is what entropy is. It's the heat going from the hot to the cold side. And not only is that how it works in this closed space of this room, but that's how it works in the entire universe. So with that type of thinking, you realize that eventually, in a very long time, the entire universe will have so much entropy, so much disorder, that it cannot sustain life and it'll be practically dead. And when I really realized that, I realized, okay, there has to be something that is beyond this, that is truly ever living. There has to be a Hayyul Qayyum, right? From that, we can realize that if the universe has an end, if anything has an end, then it has to have a beginning. And if something has a beginning, then it has to have a creator. This is why God is God, because God doesn't have a beginning or an end. God created the concept of creation, so we can't even hold him to it. Diving deeper into that, I realized that God has to, for one, not be bound by time and space and matter. He can't be hold down to these principles. He has to be above entropy, so he has to be above disorder, where he's not going to eventually get weak the same way that the universe is. He has to be self-sustaining, and that's exactly what Islam teaches.
After accepting the existence of God, what made you re-embrace Islam?
I eventually stumbled back upon the Quran. Up to this point, never actually read it nearly my whole life until maybe like 4-ish years ago. And I finally gave it a read for the first time. I thought it would be some like Shakespearean written book, really, really hard to understand, old English, but there's a bunch of new translations that are perfectly written in like modern time English now. So I finally gave it a read. I let my ego down. I let down all the guards that I had, all the kind of like doubts that I had. And actually every page that I would turn, there'd be more and more miracles that just shocked me. And I knew that there's no way that this book could have been written by a human being, and especially not by an illiterate human being that had no idea how to write such eloquent words. So as I was going through this book and I'm seeing more and more of these signs, like for an example, how could someone have known 1,400 years ago that the universe is ever expanding? Like that's such a wild, miraculous claim that we just discovered actually about 90 years ago, that the universe is expanding, that we can actually prove. 1,400 years ago, there has to be some truth there. All of the miracles in the Quran, it's all true. There's not a single one that is flawed. Like for an example, if I gave you 55 statements and I didn't know if any of them were actually true, maybe one might be real. Maybe I can tell you the price of Bitcoin in 45 years is going to be $1 million. That might be real. And if it's wrong, then you can disprove all of my previous statements. But in the Quran, back to back to back, all the statements just kept on proving more truth to me. I was absolutely shocked that this whole time, what I thought I was following was Islam, was not Islam in the slightest. It's like me first stumbling upon this religion. Okay, pray 5 times a day, and then fast, and just do all these things. It's not that robotic. There's parts in the Quran where it teaches you to actually be a good person and to have these interactions with human beings. As I was reading the Quran, just a few times I was so stunned, I took my shahada again and again and again. I kept on saying it. This time I said it and I really, really believed it, and I truly said it in my heart. For the first time in my life, I felt true order. I felt true guidance. I felt actually happy.